office for an appointment at 877-667-7017. At Health First, your health is our first concern.
1580 103.3 WPKY. Coffee Talk on the air this morning. And we've started kicking our Coffee Talk off with something that I love doing, especially since the kids are out of school, and kind of gives them a sense of normal, and it gives me a sense of pride. I love our community kids here in Caldwell and even in the region and the area. So what we've been doing is kicking off Coffee Talk with the Pledge of Allegiance, with our children doing that for us every day. And if you'd like your kid to be involved in it, it doesn't get any easier. All you have to do is call this phone number that I'm about to give you and leave it right there on the answering machine on the voicemail. The kids can do it right there, and it's that easy. Just make sure that you include their name and what school they go to, okay? So are you ready? Stand up. Come on. We got to stand up when we get the pledge. Are you ready? Here we go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, it doesn't get much better than that. Thank you so much, guys, for kicking us off. And I'll tell you, we've got a big show today, and I've been looking forward to this for a long time. And it seems like, everything goes in different directions, and we just never could get the schedules to jive, and we did today. And who I've got on the phone is Officer Chris Joyner from, you're the Public Relations Office for Land Between the Lakes, right?
That's correct, I am. And by the way, what a great thing you got there with the kids doing the Pledge of Allegiance. That's incredible. I really like that.
Aren't they adorable?
Yeah, my daughter did something like that she goes to Murray, and she led their school in the Pledge of Allegiance a few weeks before this all started, and that was pretty awesome.
I'll tell you, you know what? All the kids. Number one, I think that's something it's kind of a normal thing for them to do to kick off school, and that way they get to be a star for the day. Because I think every kid ought to have their 15 minutes of fame. I think they all ought to have a day to be a star. So
I agree 100%.
How much fun can you get? A gorgeous day, by the way.
It is.
It is. I know
it's a great day to be outdoors.
Well, and it makes you want to come to LBL so bad, Chris. It really does.
I understand completely.
You know what? It's a holiday weekend, too. And I think that's, part of it is that's the first thing we think of. When any of us get a time off, we want to hit the trails down at LBL or one of the roads, even just cruising around. I've got one kid that just loves nothing more than to get in the car and cruise around. But, I know that we had gotten some instructions that some of the stuff was, canceled and closed, and then another week we had something else. So let's get clarity today. And I said, that's
Sure.
one thing we need is clarity. What can we do and not do?
Right. And this has been an ever-evolving situation. And like you said about going to LBL, we work for the Forest Service. The people that work there love to be in the forest. And I'm sitting in my house right now with my kids, which I love my kids, but we've had a lot of togetherness here for about the past month. And so
that's a nice way to put it, togetherness.
Yeah, a lot of togetherness. And when this is over, I don't know that we want to go on a family trip together again, but on this holiday weekend, I was sitting there thinking last night how much I want to see my dad and my folks. The last day they were here, my dad ran into my truck in my driveway, and I got mad at him, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, is this I've been thinking this whole time, is that the last time that, I get to spend time with him? Because my mom got put in the hospital a few days after he left thinking she had COVID-19. She had a viral pneumonia, so she went to ICU, and so it was pretty scary for us, but it turned out not to be COVID-19, but they're back in North Carolina now. So, yeah, we've had to make a lot of adjustments in Land Between the Lakes, and I can tell you, closing things is far harder than having them open, and it is against our every instincts, and because one of the things that's a tenet of the Forest Service is to stimulate our rural economies. In fact, it's written into the Land Between the Lakes Protection Act that we're to stimulate the rural economies. And one of my responsibilities is to market land between the lakes. And it goes against everything that are in my instincts and to turn people away. But that's where we're at, because some of the things that people do recreating wise can put them in a close proximity to others. Hematite Trail was sort of the first that you mentioned that really got people's attention. The big campgrounds, and we have thousands of people at like Hillman Ferry, at Piney Campground,
Wrangler,
all of those. That didn't come as a huge surprise to the public. I think people understood that because, I mean, it's kind of like a petri dish inside there when you got a lot of folks and using this, central bathrooms. And if everybody can remember a few weeks ago how this started ramping up, bathroom restrictions is what was the tipping point for us to make that decision, because we couldn't not comply with that current state mandate at that time for those campgrounds. But Hematite Trail got damaged in 2016. So when we did all these repairs, people were flocking to it. And it's beautiful. It looks great. The problem was, 2 days before the decision was made to close it, there was 197 vehicles in the parking lot.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. And so there's parts in there, there's boardwalks where you cannot meet the mandate by the CDC and also the governor to maintain 6 feet distancing. So we had no choice but to close that. And we did not have very good compliance. Even with the closure, we still had, I think, 80 vehicles that were parked along the road and people coming into there. But that was the first one that I think the public started really not understanding.
You know what? I understand why they don't get mad or why they want to go. And I get that feeling. But when you described it to me, even when you said 195, I think you said vehicles in Hematite parking lot, that in itself is a lot, but we can still picture that. But when you made a comparison at a time not too long ago that people can remember just being inundated with people all at once. Now, what did you compare that to?
It was, we're seeing numbers that are more than the eclipse. People will remember that we were in the total part of the eclipse, and in that very limited part of the country that had the total eclipse for any duration. And so we had the largest ever visitation during that time. We've seen numbers that have passed that now. So when
they think about it, when they say, I can social distance. Okay, imagine yourself in the eclipse kind of rush of people, and then imagine yourself social distancing. It's impossible.
There's a lot of people, and folks don't realize this, but we have trail counters and road counters that give us those numbers. These aren't anecdotal. These are scientific. I mean, we know that those people were there, and there's trails that are still open. I think there's 300 miles of shoreline, and there's a lot of area that people can disperse out to. Fortunately, that's not what's happened. People have congregated into very condensed areas, and that's where the problem is. And I think the next move that really got people's attention was the closure of Turkey Bay. And I've seen a lot of the traffic on social media and people not understanding that one. But what they don't understand is that on a given weekend, we have multiple trips from EMS having to come out there because of people having rollovers and breaking bones and so
I'm sorry, I was picking on somebody for a minute. We have a lot of these guys that get out there and end up upside down in the mud.
Sure. And every time something like that happens, and staff are having to be not just assisting, but intimately assisting. And that's the problem, is that when you have a problem with a vehicle like that, I mean, there's a lot of people that have to get involved, and we're still having a lot of search and rescues, and people will go out to places like the forest properties to get that dispersed recreation, but it also, a lot of times they'll get in situations where they'll have to call search and rescue, and we're still having quite a few search and rescue calls in. And as you ride around, it's hard to believe that. I mean, I was on we had a fire. Some of your listeners may have heard about up at the nature station. Animals were never in danger, but 2 nights ago we had a fire at the bathroom there at that overlooks the grassy area at the bottom of the hill. And as I'm riding around, I'm thinking about that. Well, it doesn't look like there's a lot of people here, but if you get off of those main roads, you really start seeing the people.
Well, and when you think about, the nature station and that sort of thing, there's only so much infrastructure. And when you talk about, if we're all being pulled in different directions during something like this, and when we've got, a pandemic, and when we've got people that are told to stay home, and then we have limited resources, and when I say resources, I mean bodies as well, as far as those officers that have to come out in the middle of nowhere to get you because you didn't listen, or the helicopter and the medical professionals that are trying to help you and save a life. And, it might not be that you had a wreck. It might just be you had a heart attack, or, you bumped your leg, or you fell and tripped over a rock. Things are going to happen. And the more resources we take and try to put into that, the less that we have on the front lines fighting the virus so that we can get back to normal.
You said it perfect. I mean, we had a heart attack at, I think 2 days ago on the unit. And, I mean, those things are going to continue to happen. And people, you don't always know when those situations are going to happen for you. So you could not have said it better. I mean, alone, it sounds like I'm just going to go there and it's not going to be a big impact. But if you run into trouble, that's when it does. And as collectively brings others into it. And there's one other thing I do want to mention about that, and I think people haven't understood why we closed the elk and bison prairie, because again, there it seems like I'm going to be in my vehicle, I'm going to maintain social distance. But what we started observing there, our biologists started noticing that the animals were acting very differently. It occurred to me, I'm not a biologist, but I started seeing some of the pictures taken that animals were not behaving how I normally know them to behave, but I didn't think a whole lot of it. And then the biologist started talking about the number of vehicles we were having in there, and we had never had any data from when we started collecting data on visits to elk and bison prairie where we had numbers anywhere close to that. And so we were like triple what we were at this time last year. And so the animals are seeing this many vehicles, and I mean, they're used to seeing vehicles come in there, but when you've got literally one right after the other, we were starting to notice signs of stress on the animals. And also, we had so many people trying to come in, the lines were backed up into the trace, and people were trying to come in from the north, and it was becoming a safety hazard for driving. And we had multiple points there that just became concerns for us for visitor safety, and had to make that decision. It was not a decision we wanted to make, but it had to be made.
Well, and when you think about that too, I know what's on the forefront of our mind is coronavirus. And we say, well, but I can't give the virus to the buffalo. And if I'm in my car, well, but there's other things that you can pass along to them. There's other things that stress can put on them medically. And
sure.
We could actually lose some of our bison if we really stress them out.
Yes, absolutely. And in the elk as well. In the elk, we have a lot more limited number and a lot more restrictions on bringing in more to the herd. Because of different rules and state laws. So we are very cautious when it comes to them. The bison we sell at each of the herds every other year. So this next winter, if we have a appropriate numbers, we'll sell some. And we do that to keep the numbers in balance because there's no predators in there. And if we don't have enough to sell, we won't have to sell. But you're exactly right. They're getting distressed, and the bison was the one that people were seeing demonstrating the most odd of the behavior. And
well, they're very nervous. Just on a normal day, they're just a nervous animal.
Sure. Yes. You don't want to pet them. Yeah, they're very nervous. We did have somebody try to do that once. Yeah,
not a good idea. When it snorts at you, not a good idea.
No.
Well, and I'll tell you that it's not just those couple of places. What place, like Wrangler, that's another one. And I know a lot of people said, well, that doesn't make any sense. That campground, you can spread out. In certain areas, you can. But even the day use, if you put 20 trailers in that day use area, you're going to be on top of each other before you know it. So is it just the campground and the cabins at Wrangler, or is it the trails at Wrangler? Since all of the trailheads, not all of them, but a lot of them actually start behind the gate at Wrangler. Is it only the ones that actually where the trailheads leave Wrangler that are closed, or is it all of them?
So none, the trailhead's not doesn't the area inside Wranglers being closed doesn't change the open or closed nature of the trail. You can still go on the trails. If you can get on them at other places, and you can. The general forest is open for what we would call cross country travel. So they can ride through there to get onto the developed trails to at Wranglers, but we do have 1, 2, 3, and 6 closed due to storm damage, and that was back in January.
Right.
And I'll get back to your point there, but on the storm damage, we were in the process of having the timber sold so professionals could come in there and clean it and move it and get it out of there so we could open those trails back up. Whenever we have a big storm and tornado damage, it becomes a lot more hazardous for us to deal with it. We have sawyers that are trained that deal with timber mainly on fires, and when you get like a tornado like that, everybody knows you'll see the twisting nature of those trees, and they become dangerous. And so companies that go in there could salvage it and move it with equipment that's made to move large trees, and so that's why we pursued a timber harvest. It's called a salvage harvest, and we were in the middle of that when this all broke out. So those trails are still impacted by the storm, but people can still ride on the other trails if they can get to them, and they just can't start from inside the day use area or inside the campground.
Well, and those that are familiar, I know there are maps online for just the trails and that sort of thing that you can get a hold of. And if you're a horse person that's out there, most likely you've got a buddy that's got a map. If you don't have a map, and you all can talk about it over the phone, not in person, but over the phone. Where to hit it. But, and in case somebody doesn't know and you're just joining us, this is Chris Joyner from Public Affairs Officer for Land Between the Lakes. And he's helping us kind of figure out, what we're allowed to do, especially we've got a big holiday weekend, and I know people are going to want to get out. And, one of the biggest things, though, is I will admit, if you can't park at Wrangler to hit the trails, I don't want to be in the middle of the trail for 4 hours and come back and find myself ticketed because I'm on the side of the road blocking traffic with my horse trailer.
Sure. Yeah, you still have to abide by the rules, and you have to find a place where you can safely pull off of the road and not obstruct a trail. That's another thing is that is a pretty much guaranteed ticket is if you're obstructing a road. But to get off where you can get it completely off the road and not proceed any further, that is a challenge as well. And we have to put those limits on how far you can get from a road, because if not, people would go out and just drive through the woods, which they do sometimes. But but to get the vehicle completely off the road and not block the road is the secret on that. And there's places to do that. Just have to be cautious and select a spot that's going to allow you to get your horse out of the trailer and not obstruct traffic.
Well, and I know the campgrounds are predominantly disclosed across the board, right?
Yeah, so all of our developed campgrounds are closed. We are still open for dispersed camping. And
now, dispersed camping, tell me is that backwoods camping? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that is. And the dispersed is the agency's term for it, but it just means you're camping and it's not a designated campground, which we are open to dispersed camping. The person still needs to get the backcountry permit, and they can buy those online, and that'll allow you to do it for the entire year. You can do it just. We also have some of the self-serve campgrounds have where you can just camp for one night. We did that to save people money as a new change this year, but they're all closed. So the dispersed camping is the one that you would buy online, and that allows you to just camp anywhere. That's where I'm getting most of the calls with my staff. One of my staff members is answering the phones. We switched over to Google Voice so that we could remotely answer the phone lines. We've been doing that for 2 or 3 weeks now. And I think that's probably the biggest question we're getting. What does it mean to disperse camp? It just means that you're camping in an area that's not a designated campground. It's open. Don't go into an area that's closed and you're camping. Could be in an RV, could be in a tent, could be in the back of your truck. And all of those things are legal just as long as you got the permit.
What about fishing? Is that the same thing? Because I know, so like we are talking about, different campgrounds that were closed. We mentioned one earlier that was a really popular for fishing and camping. What about fishing? Is that the same thing? What are, I guess that's a little bit different because, campgrounds is not necessarily the same thing. What is the rules about that? Do you find a spot as long as it's nowhere around anybody and that's okay? Or boat ramps open? What's the deal there?
So most of our boat ramps are open unless they're in a campground. Those are where some people, I've seen some things on social media where people are saying they got a ticket for fishing. They did not get a ticket for fishing. They got a ticket for going into a closed area. They may have been fishing and not camping, but those areas are closed, and we have to do it that way. I mean, we can't, it may sound simple enough, but when we close the area, we're closing it to access. And so a person can't venture in there even if their sole intent is to fish. So they need to observe those barricades. They're up there for a reason. And our law enforcement doesn't want to write tickets. I can tell you that. We do not receive the money from those tickets. The U.S. Treasury does. We would much rather not have to make those contacts with the current COVID-19 situation. It helps our officers a lot if folks can observe those closures. But we've closed some areas, and those are areas that were identified for being problematic to meeting the governor's mandates and the CDC mandates. And those are areas that are closed to access, period. And so don't be going into those areas if you're trying to fish. There's 300 miles of shoreline to find other places to fish.
And it's pretty obvious now. I mean, as far as the signage, I mean, it's not going to be where you have to look for it. This is something where these places that are closed are clearly marked.
Correct. And also, I'm glad you brought that up, because the best place to find information about this ever-changing situation is on our alerts page. Person can go to landbetweenthelakes.us and then navigate to our alerts page. I have my staff and myself, we update it multiple times a day, and we put a date stamp on it. That doesn't mean that all the stuff on there is new information as of that day, that time. What it means is it's updated at that time. And I say that because I did get one question. A person thought everything had changed because they saw that date stamped there. So if I go to it it shows me that Our last update was at April 9 at 9:25 a.m. right now when I'm looking at it. So we haven't date stamped updated it today yet, but we will. And that's updated multiple times a day. And you can go through and see every single one of the places that's closed. And if you're not seeing it on there, you can give us a call or and our numbers to call are right there on it as well. And give us that information that something is missing, that you've got a closure out there, but it's not on the website. But we don't want to write tickets. I can tell you, we do not want to write tickets. I can't be more emphatic about that. We want people to enjoy themselves if they decide to come out. First of all, we want people to follow the direction of the CDC and the governor and all levels of government that are making these recommendations. We're following those recommendations. We want the public to follow those. But if they're coming out, we need them to abide by the rules.
Well, and, one of the places that everybody loves is a nature station, and those types of places are going to be closed too, right?
Sure. The nature station's closed. That was one of the first ones that was closed. That was in the first round of them. And the home place is another one.
Now, if they would like to be active with the nature station, even though they can't go there, there's a turtle naming contest right now.
Yes, there sure is. Yeah, and I've kind of been surprised there's not a whole lot of people been commenting on that. But yeah, about a year ago, we changed our philosophy on that. There's in the animal care world for wildlife, there's been a posture of not naming wildlife, and that's been a common academic posture to have, and we've held that same one. But we've also noticed that the kids have not had those emotional connections to the animals, and that's ultimately what we want. We want them to have that emotional connection so that they go out and they do responsible things when they're out in the wildlife, so they're not doing things that are going to jeopardize animals. And we found that naming animals gives that emotional connection. And so we've been doing that for the past year. People probably wondered why all of a sudden we're doing that. But yeah, go on our website, our Facebook page, and they can contribute to that and name one of our turtles. I
think it's a lot of fun. I really do. I think the kids get a kick out of it. And it's a way to just kind of keep, connected with it. Even when you're not there and you're at school and you're not on vacation and can't come, you can still stay connected with it. You all have a wonderful website and social media presence.
Yeah, we've been putting updates from also the home place, and we don't have as much as we would probably like, and that's because we also are meeting those mandates, but those animals still have to be fed, and so we're still having to go out there, and we are trying to post some things when we can, and this is hard on everybody, but it's the right thing to do, and is also the mandated thing to do.
Well, Chris, hang out for just a second. We're going to take a break and pay a couple of bills and support local, and then we're going to come back, and when we come back, we'll talk about, oh my goodness, everything's upside down again. It's turkey season. So we'll talk about turkey season for a second, and we're going to talk about hogs in a minute, too. So stick with us. It's Chris Joyner from Public Relations from Land Between the Lakes. So we've got a lot more to talk about coming up. Hang out with us, 1580 103.3 WPKY.
Happy Easter from your friends at First Southern National Bank. This very special time is an opportunity to let you know they value your friendship and patronage. Thank you, and happy Easter from First Southern National Bank. West Kentucky Real Estate and Auction normally holds monthly auctions at the Auction Center on U.S. Highway 62 in Princeton in the former Hancock's grocery store. Right now, things are on hold. Maybe now's the time to think about planning an auction for later this year. If you would like to have an auction or would like to find out how to consign in an auction, contact West Kentucky Real Estate and Auction, Wayne Boyd, Broker Auctioneer. You can also check out their website, westkentuckyrealestate.com.
During this trying time of the COVID-19 crisis, the Body Shop at Trice Hughes is open for business to help you with your repair needs. With the uncertainty that these times bring, Trice Hughes wants you to know they will help with your insurance deductible to get your vehicle repaired. Call for an appointment or free estimate at 270-365-5522. Working together with your home team at Trice Hughes. we'll make sure you receive the service you deserve.
Kentucky barbecue. There's nothing like it. You'll be glad to know that Noth's Barbecue in Grand Rivers is open for carryout. It's been a long time since you've been able to get that pulled pork from tender whole shoulders, cooked for 12 hours straight, the old-time traditional way. So you better call ahead, reserve your order, and drive on over to Noth's. When you get there, one of the servers will come out and greet you. Noth's Barbecue, where they've been pigging out for over 50 years.
The folks at Raider Auction Company want to say thank you to all of our farmers for the food they put on our table each and every day.
And here's your WPKY Weather Edge Weather Center forecast for today. Beautiful day to get your legs all stretched out. Maybe take in a mile or two on a trail here or there. Should be gorgeous weather for it. Sunshine, high 56. Tonight, clear, low 37. Tomorrow, frost. Should be gone by about 7 o'clock in the morning. Then on Easter Sunday, showers likely, high 65. It is 36 at 8:50, 1580, 103.3 WPKY.
Your WPKY Weather Edge Weather Center forecast is brought to you by Brantley Furniture.
1580, 103.3 WPKY. And again, we got Chris Joyner, Public Affairs Officer from Land Between the Lakes. Good morning. Of course, he's been with us this morning and talking about Land Between the Lakes and the different things that are still open and what's closed, and kind of giving an explanation for that, because I don't want everybody to be mad at you, Chris. It's not your fault, right? Chris? There we go. Now can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, there we go. I said, it's not your fault. I don't want everybody to be mad at you for about the closures. I mean, I think you guys would rather have seen it be open, especially during springtime when everything just kind of comes alive from the winter. I know it's rough and it's hard for them and you. And, the other thing I think everybody looks forward to every year, they're chomping at the bit, is turkey season. And that is right around the corner.
It is. I might be one of the most fanatical turkey hunters that you'll meet. I've hunted all across the country turkey hunting, and it is my favorite thing to do, my favorite hobby. And right now we're still planning is that we'll open for turkey season on the opening day of turkey season for Kentucky, and that day will be the day it'll go in effect for Land Between the Lakes sides of the Kentucky side and also the Tennessee side. So next Saturday, it'll be the 18th, will be the day that it'll go in effect.
So okay, I know with COVID-19, and this is where it gets confusing for so many people, because I know that we're not doing out-of-state hunting, right?
Correct. Well, people need to reference their respective states. So if they're planning to hunt the portion of Kentucky, they need to reference the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife guidance on that. And I'm not the right person to speak to that. I do know that they have stopped selling out-of-state license, but they really need to visit their website to understand what that means for out-of-state people that maybe already have purchased a license. I'm not the right person to speak to that.
Well, and when we talk about hunting, though, I mean, outside of, the out-state licenses and things like that, again, when there's hunters that, say, well, I normally go down to LBL or I normally do that, again, you're going to have to look at the websites and really, take into consideration what's open and what's closed.
Sure, and if it's a closed area, that's going to mean closed to access. Now, we will put guidance on there if there's some adjustments to that. For example, Turkey Bay. It's my understanding that we will allow hunting in there, even though that area is closed to UTV riding. That's my understanding. So
that means you're hoofing it in, right?
That means they're hoofing it in.
Okay.
Yes, you're not going to be driving a UTV in. So the campground is already closed to hunting, but that's as far as Turkey Bay. I think that would be the lone exception of where an area is closed, but you could still hunt in. and we'll post something on our alerts page to clarify that. It's not a popular place for people to turkey hunt, but some people do. I'm sure would be interested in turkey hunting there. We'll post something on there. Some of these decisions will probably be made later in the week, and it'll be with the governor of Kentucky being the lead on that, and also the guidance from the CDC and also the state will be the guide on how are those decisions being made. But we'll post them on the alerts page. But right now we are planning to open up for turkey hunting next Saturday, a week from tomorrow.
Well, I'll tell you, I loved it because right there on the front of Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, right there on the front of their website, it says fishing and hunting remain open, and that they encourage you to do so. A lot of the campgrounds and little things like that you normally, maybe you go there to use the restroom, maybe you normally do a picnic taking a break, and it's different places that we're used to kind of stopping by on the way. Now, some of them, they may not be available to you and open anymore, but we're still going to hunt. And that's what it's all about anyway, right?
Well, and like I said, I love turkey hunting, and I'm looking forward to it. Been thinking about it for a couple months, and how this COVID-19 would impact it. Certainly was on my radar because that's the one big hunting season in the spring. I mean, people still are doing the squirrel hunting's pretty popular at Land Between Lakes in the early part of the spring and maybe in that January time frame. But right now, everybody's eyes, if you're in the hunting world, is on turkey hunting. Well,
and I'll tell you, I don't know if you've heard it or not. On Monday, we're going to debut that on our morning show. There's the George Jones song, He Stopped Loving Her Today. They've got a new spin on that. It's called He Stopped Gobbling Today. And if you haven't heard it, you've got to tune in on Monday.
Look forward to that.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Once you hear it, it cannot be unheard. I'm just telling you now, that song will never be the same for you ever again.
I'm looking forward to it. I tell people turkey hunting is probably the most addictive sport there is. For me, it is. I killed my first bird when I just come back from Iraq, and my brother he wanted to take me turkey hunting, and this has been 20 years ago almost, and we 15 years ago, and we went out and I killed my first one. I ended up having 4 beards. It was this really massive bird. It was like 27 pounds, and
wow,
that was my first one, and so I've been hooked ever since, and it's my favorite sport. And right now we are planning to still have it available. That could change. Go to our alerts page, though, to find out that.
Well, and I will say that kind of, we all talk about needing to get a lot of the stress of all of the coronavirus and that sort of thing kind of out of our brain and just take a brain vacation for a minute. And that's a great way to do it, is to get out in nature and enjoy it. And I'll tell you, one of the ways that you guys are really trying to keep a lot of these trails and a lot of even Turkey Bay and a lot of those areas, where they can be accessible and they don't get tore up, is hog eradication. And that is something that, is that being put on hold due to everything being upside down right now? I mean, where are we at with that?
It is not. So we are on a 365 approach to our feral hog eradication. And we introduced aerial operations this year, and a lot of your listeners would know about that, where we partner with another agency in the Department of Agriculture, one of our sister agencies, and they use helicopters to pursue feral hogs, and we've been extremely successful. We were able to use them for 2-week periods, 2 single-week periods during this winter when the leaves were off, and we're incredibly successful. We also been trapping. Now, we do suspend trapping operations during turkey season, and that's because we use bait in those traps, and we don't want a hunter to inadvertently be hunting over bait, because we typically use corn, and that would certainly attract turkeys, and we don't want somebody inadvertently violating the law because they didn't know a trap was nearby. So we suspend those operations during turkey season. We do that every year.
Well, now,
But,
what if one walks right up on them? Is that something you can take now or no?
No, we do not allow any hunting of feral hogs, and that is at the recommendation of the state and also the other departments of agriculture, our sister agency, APHIS, Animal Plant and Health Inspection Service. They're the ones that help us with the eradication. And their guidance is that hunted hogs, they disperse onto other properties. I have property that's adjacent to Land Between Lakes. There's a big lake between me and the Land Between Lakes, but they can swim across it.
Right.
They have to be motivated to do that, but if they're hunted, they tend to disperse onto adjacent properties, and I can tell you as an adjacent property owner, I wouldn't want them on my property.
Well, I mean, I would probably do a lot of things I normally wouldn't if somebody's chasing me with a gun. I mean, I'm just saying.
Right.
Right.
And we were incredibly successful this year. We killed or we euthanized a little over 100, and I'd have to look back at my notes here from last year, but to date we've almost killed 400 feral hogs this year. Last year, for the entire year, we killed 124 in 2019, and 2020 thus far we've killed 391.
Are we getting ahead of this situation, or are we just at this point happy if it doesn't get worse than it is now?
So the experts tell us that we are getting ahead, that we have a small enough population that we're not in just a maintenance level. So a lot of places, if they get so inundated with them, all you can do is just maintain the population. We're not at that point, and that's why we've taken this very aggressive approach, because we want to stay ahead of it as best we can. We most of our operations have been in the Tennessee portion of Land Between the Lakes. We did do some into Kentucky. We ventured up into Kentucky, and some of those feral hogs that were euthanized were done so in the Kentucky portion, in that southern area, far south area of Kentucky where it meets Tennessee. But we're looking really good as comparative to last year. And a lot of folks thought, well, this aerial operations seems like a waste. And in one of the days that we did the feral hog operations, we killed 96
Wow.
feral hogs. And so, yes, it's very effective, and but it's limited to times when we don't have leaves on the trees, and so we can't do the aerial operations this time of year. We got to wait until we got another leaf off period.
Of course, if you're just joining us, we're talking to Chris Joyner, Public Affairs Officer with LBL at WPKY Princeton. And when you talk about feral hogs, where do they come from? Because feral, I mean, that means they're not native to wherever they are. In this instance, Tennessee and Kentucky at LBL. So if they're not native to us, where are they coming from? And I know it doesn't take very many to really take hold into a larger group, because they do reproduce fairly fast. But where are they coming from?
So they reproduce about 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days is what you always hear the farmer tell you. But they are largely released by the public, and we believe that there's very solid evidence that the ones that Land Between the Lakes were released intentionally. They all tend to be very genetically similar, almost exactly similar, indicating that there was a common source for their release. And the dispersion of them is pretty indicative of placement. In other words, when we got the feral hogs and started seeing them, it wasn't like a wave moving from one end to the other. It was spotty sightings.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so there was a lot of land in between that we would have thought that we would have seen.
In other words, it doesn't look like there's a migration moving across.
correct. It definitely appears that someone has intentionally released them, which would be illegal. If they are caught, they could face restitution, and it could be in millions of dollars. I would think that it would certainly be felony charges. If we were able to make an arrest there, it would be a very big deal. The individual would face some very serious criminal charges.
And when you think about it, we hear a lot about, especially with the conservation efforts like in Florida around the Everglades and the snakes that are have been released that don't belong there and weren't native there, but now they're killing off other species because they got to eat too. So, when you think about that, how long does it take, or would you speculate, because I know you don't know, that it would take to get to the numbers we are now if somebody just, let 10 go?
Don't really know. We know the first sightings of modern day. We know from some of the former residents that there were times where some would get out, but back when many decades ago, but it wasn't. They weren't established. But this current established population, we have reports that go back to 2005, where a few people saw one or two, and it just over time the population's grown, and we allowed hunting for about 10 years, where we knew that there were feral hogs at Land Between the Lakes from about 2005 to about 2015, and we had very, very low success. Very few feral hogs reported, and that's when we started really ramping up our trapping operations, and then we introduced the aerial operations this year and have been very successful with those. So there's a lot of factors in there, and you make a great point about the invasive species, because when they come into an area, they can dominate really quickly because there's not those limiting factors that nature has placed in there that would normally keep numbers in check, and so they can outcompete native species, and they disrupt the ecology of the forest. They can disrupt entire watersheds because of the way they root, and the possible damage in cemeteries is something we just cannot accept. And
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, we are very concerned about that, and we've had some get into cemeteries and do some rooting around, and that's certainly not acceptable. And so we've taken more aggressive approaches and are being very successful in having them eliminated. Don't know how long it would take, but the thing I've learned through this is that any hog can be feral hog and can be damaging. I think I went into this learning or thinking that it had to be an Eurasian type of boar, but no, it can be potbelly pigs. Somebody could go to Rural King and buy a hog there and turn them loose, and that hog can do just as much damage as these that are already there. So it doesn't take a specific hog to do that damage.
Well, do you think in the future that we may be looking to maybe some of the public being able to, if they're there, actually taking advantage of that? Do you think we're anywhere close to that,
As far as hunting?
Right.
Is that what you mean? No, we will not allow hunting at Land Between the Lakes for feral hogs again. And one of the big reasons for that is we know that allowing hunting encourages others to dump feral hogs off and to maintain that hunting population. And we feel like that's probably the reason why they were released to start with. And so we're certainly not going to reward that behavior by allowing them to do what their ultimate goal is.
Giving the toddler what they want, right?
Exactly.
Well, I know I see that. I know that there's, hey, I wouldn't mind it as well, but I see the point, and sometimes you've got to understand that the good doesn't necessarily, or the fun doesn't necessarily outweigh, the causes that the end result of that. So we sure do appreciate you so much, because I know you're busy and you really took the time out to hang out with us and explain some things for us, because the coronavirus has really got a lot of things upside down. I know some people said, well, it just ruined my fishing. No, you can still go fishing and you can still do some fun things. You just got to maybe change up the way that you normally do them.
Tess, I appreciate being on here. And the thing that I really appreciate is being able to speak to your listeners and give a little bit of the background behind the mystery of our decisions. And we're learning just as they are. This is an ever-changing landscape, and ultimately we're in a common goal, and we're following the guidance from the CDC and from the governor, and we want to get back to normal as soon as we can as well.
Well, and I know we had talked. He's Officer Joyner is also a military veteran, and I think it's important that people realize sometimes the why, because I don't think they get as angry. Sometimes if they just get told what they're supposed to do and that they can't do a whole bunch of stuff and nobody will explain why, it's frustrating. And especially when it's something that you enjoy. And you and I had talked about how much, that you enjoy it too. And it's not anything that that you personally did. You didn't close down everything. And I think people need to realize that too when they see some of our officers out and, they see Fish and Game out. Don't take it out on them. They didn't do it.
That's right. Most people seek out careers like this because we love being in nature and love being in the forest, and that's where we feel at home. And my office is normally on Land Between the Lakes. I love that. I moved here from Colorado because of that. I
just want to point out, he said he moved to Kentucky from Colorado. Take that, Rockies.
That's right. Yeah. The people, I'm going to be just completely honest here, that the people are just the most awesome people that I've ever met. And I talk about my first time learning about Land Between the Lakes. I was at basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky in the middle of July, and back in the 90s, and it was miserable. We had this one guy in my platoon that was from Kentucky, and I was telling him one day, I was like, man, is the rest of Kentucky just miserable and hot? And he's like, no, man, there's this great place. It's called Land Between the Lakes. That's where my family always goes to recreate. And I thought, man, that's a funny name. And he told me the whole story about how it came to the name, and thought, you know what, I'm going to make it there one day. And so a couple of decades later, I was driving across the country, spent some time at Land Between the Lakes, and I thought, this is going to be, I need to get back here at some point. And my career had an opportunity for me to get here, and we love it. We built a house here. The people are the most awesome people that I've ever met in my travels, people in Western Kentucky specifically, and have certainly welcomed us in, and I certainly love being here.
Oh, we are glad that you chose us. We like us pretty good. I'll tell you, it's kind of like Eden down there at LBL. It really is. It
really is.
It's beautiful, and it's the 4 seasons and the turnaround of all of it, and especially in the spring when everything kind of comes alive. I think everybody is chomping at the bit to get down there and start camping and hitting the trails and doing those sorts of things. And we appreciate you giving us some guidance on what we can do instead of everybody telling you no. Well, at least you told us yes, you can. You just got to do it a little different.
That's right.
He's our yes guy today. That's a good thing. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful Easter, and thanks for being with us.
You as well.
Bye-bye. Of course, that's Chris Joyner, our public affairs officer from LBL, and has been with us today. We sure do appreciate that. And, again, Easter has not been canceled. LBL has not been permanently closed, and the lake is still there, and the fish are still waiting on you. You just got to do things just a little bit different. If you've got questions, if you need answers to any of it, all you have to do is you can find them on social media. You can find them on their website as well. Any of the things down to the feral hog eradication, you can find that on there as well. Turkey season is upon us. You can get all that information right there online at landbetweenthelakes.us. Very, very easy to find. And from there, you can can jump and go to just about any department or area of the park that you would like to ask about. So we sure do thank Chris for being with us, and we thank you guys for being around. And have a wonderful Easter. Please behave yourself. Be kind to one another. Take good care. Things can happen very easily. You want to be careful over the weekend. We had a near accident throughout the week on the farm this week. So it's just things you don't think about. You need to take a little time to think about those things, okay? Don't forget, Audrey Lamb is going to be here in just a little bit. She's going to get you caught up on the weekend so that you can hit the weekend and hit the ground running, so to say. And then Todd Griffin will be in with sports and kind of give you an update on what's going on there. And, of course, we'll have Governor Beshear at 4 o'clock. And Andy Beshear, Uncle Andy, we always look forward to hearing from him. And we'll be having that at 4 o'clock. So stick around. There's more to come. 914 1580 103.3 WPKY.
Each year, thousands of adults in the United States get sick from diseases that could be prevented by vaccines. People with diabetes, both type 1 and 2, are at a higher risk for serious problems from certain vaccine-preventable diseases. Diabetes can make it harder for your immune system to fight infections. The flu can raise your blood glucose to dangerous levels. People with diabetes are at increased risk for death from lung infection, like pneumonia, even meningitis. And people with diabetes have a higher risk of hepatitis B than the rest of the population. Vaccines are the safest way for you to protect your health, even if you're taking prescription medications. Vaccine side effects are usually mild and go away on their own. Most health insurance plans cover recommended vaccines. Ask your healthcare provider. For more information on vaccines, go to cdc.gov. Search vaccines. Information provided by Pennyrile District Health Department.
During this trying time of the COVID-19 crisis, the Body Shop at Trice Hughes is open for business to help you with your repair needs. With the uncertainty that these times bring, Trice Hughes wants you to know they will help with your insurance deductible to get your vehicle repaired. Call for an appointment or free estimate at 270-365-5522. Working together with your home team at Trice Hughes, we'll make sure you receive the service you deserve.
Your local McDonald's wants you to know that they're ready to serve you for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They've always had their drive-thru, and now they're offering curbside pickup service as well. To avoid the wait in the drive-thru, you can download the McDonald's app and try curbside pickup. They appreciate your patience and understanding during this time. We are all having to adjust to this new way of life. It's temporary, but in the meantime, enjoy breakfast, lunch, or dinner at your local McDonald's.
Serving Caldwell County since 1950. We're 1580, 103.3 WPKY Princeton.
Fox News, I'm Chris Foster. President Trump on Twitter writes, big economic bounce back, calling for another round of coronavirus financial relief, including payroll tax cuts and the return of tax write-offs for business entertainment. Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia tells Fox we'll have to get back to work before this virus is completely gone.
We know it might not be the same date in every location that we're all back to work. We'll need to plan accordingly. But we also know that we can't wait too long.
Yemen reports its first case of coronavirus. An outbreak there would overwhelm a healthcare system already crippled by civil war. President Trump and Joe Biden are tied in a new Fox poll.
The president may be getting bolstered by the TV exposure from his daily White House coronavirus briefings, while Biden's been forced to stay